force. It's got a lot of power, and it makes me feel like that. It makes me feel like that.
Oh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the O. Charles Show. I'm your host, Charlie Charles, and I am honored to be here today with my dad, an international operatic tenor who is joining us from across the ocean in Europe. So thank you so much for being here, Dad.
Thank you for having me.
Today, I wanted to talk with you about character analysis as an actor and sort of how to take a role that you have been given and sort of apply it. And you are an amazing actor, and like many of the recent roles you've had have just been stunning, and your interpretation of the character, people have compared it to some of the most famous interpretations that have ever existed. So I don't actually have a list of questions here today with me because I just want to hear from you kind of your approach. I know it's very different than like a lot of the textbook acting approaches, and so I really want to hear a lot from you about where you start. So, when you get a role, like when you're offered a role and you accept it, what is the first thing going through your mind in terms of the character and how you're going to portray the character?
Well, I think the first thing that's always important is the text. And so that's usually the most tedious work. And fortunately, now that you are old, I've employed you to do my translations because that's the tedious work. So, uh, from the time I was in college, I guess we'll start there. When I was in college, I was really interested in everybody else's interpretation of whatever role I was doing. There are some teachers who will say, you should never listen to any recordings and never watch any other productions of a show you're doing because you don't want to um, copy everything that they're doing. But I disagree with that. I have always been one that wanted to see everything possible. So if there were 20 recordings of an opera or 10 live videos of an opera, I would watch all of them because I'm interested in seeing what works and doesn't work and taking kind of the best parts of what everybody else has done. I mean, there's a reason that there are traditions in opera, especially. This is an art form that's been going on for hundreds of years, and there are standard things that are done. And so I think it's important not to just disregard the standard things, even if you are adding a new take on something. And so for me, I always like to listen to the people that came before me, see what they did, and then apply what works for me and disregard what doesn't work for me. But the important thing is always text. It's always text. At the end of the day, it's still theater, whether you're singing or just speaking. Uh, it's a theatrical art form, and that has always been what made opera fun for me, almost more so than the singing a lot of times, which is also a little bit different. There are a lot of singers who just want to stand and sing, and they're not interested in the acting. They just want to be on stage making the most beautiful sound that they can make. And beauty of sound has never been something that I ever really thought about because I always think in terms of the character. If the character is not supposed to be making a beautiful sound, why would I make a beautiful sound? If the character is supposed to be making a beautiful sound, then okay, you try and make the beautiful sound. But everything that I do vocally is always informed by what the character is doing, what the character's goal is in that scene. And so I've always approached it in a more theatrical way than a lot of my colleagues do. But as far as text, that's always been the hardest thing. Now it's a lot easier because there's technology that allows you to just copy and paste the text from somebody's website with the libretto on it, and then you just throw in your translation. But it used to be where I would have to literally look up word by word definitions for shows. I mean, if it was something that was in a strange language that I'd never heard of, you were literally going word by word for like Polish or something, which doesn't have standard translations online or didn't at the time. Now you can access anything, which makes everybody's job easier, which is also why it was a little disheartening. I went last May, I went and spoke to some students at the University of Michigan, and so many of them don't even do translations now when all they have to do is pop it into the computer and it just spits it out. And that the younger singers aren't even doing that much is a little shocking to me. But I mean, the people that do the work will get separated from the people that don't do the work. I guess that's a long-winded answer that didn't really answer anything, but that's kind of a general approach to how I approach things.
Yeah, but that's so interesting because even, well, as an opera singer, you're not only dealing with words themselves, but like how the music is written. But then you're so unlike just as a regular actor, you're incorporating so many elements of art within your interpretation, and so you have to manage all that. But then just even just that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but at the same time, I think what I have enjoyed in seeing your performances is it stands out because so many people, like you said, that are in opera, they might be able to sing well, but they're not making their performance appealing to watch. And which is kind of surprising. And I think that actually, if more people had a theatrical approach to opera, because that's really what it is, then maybe it would be kind of more accessible and enjoyable among the younger generations. Because I think,
Well, one of the things though is opera singing is hard. And I think the people that focus on the singing so much have a harder time because if all you're thinking about is the hard thing that you have to do, it becomes that much harder.
hmm,
So I was doing an opera uh, last fall, and I was talking to the soprano about her thought process through it. I mean, because we both had kind of challenging roles, and she was always thinking very technically, and there are days where I could hear it, and she asked what I was thinking about. And when I walk on stage, I do as much preparation as I can beforehand. So vocally, when I step on stage for a performance, I'm not thinking technique at all because at that point for me, the technique has been kind of baked into the preparation that I've done. So that has to be a secondary afterthought for me. So when I'm going into a scene, I'm thinking about what my character is supposed to be trying to accomplish. What is my goal in the scene? How do I get there? And how do I get there using the music that I have? So I'm not thinking technically at all at that point, which is also very different from a lot of people. Because if you do obsess over the music, which I used to do, then it never goes well because live theater is an imperfect art form, and opera singing is so dependent on there's so many different factors that are outside of yourself that determine whether you're having a good singing day or not. It's not like
hmm,
you're not a piano, you're not an instrument that you just hit a key and a note comes out. There's so many other factors, whether you've slept that day, what the temperature is, what the humidity is, what you ate, um, whether the conductor is going at your tempo that you want to go at or not, whether there's a prop that has been misplaced on stage, whether the set is not doing something, if a colleague of yours forgets text or forgets a movement that they're supposed to do. There's so many factors that if you are constantly just thinking musically, for me, it becomes a very unnatural performance. Um, so I do all of that preparation work beforehand. So that happens through my practice at home and also when I'm practicing in rehearsal. I rehearse as if it was a performance all the time. So I go full strength vocally. I never mark. Marking is when you sing either a little bit lightly or you sing down the octave and you kind of take it easy. I use that time to build my endurance so that if I have to sing something, if I'm doing one scene 10 times in a rehearsal, I know that by the time I only have to do that scene one time, it's going to be a piece of cake. And so for me, it's the preparation beforehand that makes life easier when I go on stage and makes everything kind of second nature.
yeah, and that's really interesting because I've read this like acting handbook I had started telling you about, but what they said was like what you're saying. As an opera singer, your interpretation is a lot through music, and so that's kind of like a parameter that you have, like like you're saying, the things like the set and the tempo and what other things the director has told you to do are parameters. So you have to operate your interpretation within those boundaries. So you're saying get those down, and that could even apply if you're not singing, I guess, like if you're doing a dance or something like in a musical, or like if there's certain movements you have to do, you're saying do that, prepare that, so that's just, you're not even thinking about it, and you're just focusing on very practically, not how you're feeling that day, not how it's going actually, but just very practically, what is my character supposed to be doing, and then just do that. So it's
Yeah,
very
it makes it much
straightforward.
more interesting for me. And you and I have had this conversation before. Uh, the difference between operatic acting and straight theater acting. In straight theater, there are so many more choices that you have to make because you can say a sentence in 1,000 different ways. But for opera singing, I mean, I guess you can make subtle variations, but basically it's tempo, volume, I mean, consonants. It's not as so many of the choices are already made for you by the composer that it makes it does put it confines you a little bit, but it's also very liberating because you know that what you're doing is what the composer wanted you to do.
Right.
So then you just take what you have the choices that you have, that's where you have the freedom. So those are more acting choices than musical choices. So that's how you hold your body and what you're doing with yourself. And that a lot of times is just a product of what the director wants. And so for me, that there, I at this point in my career, which is now 20 years in, 20 plus years in, I guess, uh, I I do the research, but I come in kind of with a blank slate because I know that the director has a vision in their head, and my job is to realize the director's vision for that character. It's not to be,
Mm.
it's not for me to realize my vision of the character. It's to realize the director's vision because there's a reason that director was hired, especially in the places where I'm working with a lot of really well-known directors, and they have an interpretation. I might not always agree with it, but
Right.
my job as an actor and a singer that is hired by this company to work with this director is to realize that director's vision. And sometimes it's more collaborative than others, and that's fine. Sometimes they want me to come up with ideas, also fine. Sometimes they don't want me to have any opinion on it at all, which is also fine. Um, I'm very flexible in that sense, but there are some people that either do so much research that they become overwhelmed with what this has to be and that's in conflict with what the director's vision is, or they come in with absolutely no idea and the director says, just show me something, and they don't even know how to show anything. So
Mm.
for me as a performer, I'm able to either follow the guidelines of the director, or if the director wants me to play, I'm happy to play. But not everybody is happy to play. And when you get colleagues that don't know how to play, it gets a little strange.
That is
Um,
awkward.
it is awkward because you're like, you wonder. I mean, you can't ever say that a choice is bad that somebody's making. It's a different choice. It's not the choice you would make.
Right.
Um,
Well, if they're
it
not
does.
making any choice at all, that makes it awkward for you if you're making choices.
Well, where it gets complicated is I worked with a very, very, very famous director, and this director told us to just all go and try something. But it was a scene where there were 8 people in the scene,
Wow.
and you can't have 8 people just doing improv when you're communicating with each other. It doesn't really work. And the thing is that this director basically kept that first day's improv as the scene going into the performance, and we were just like, what is happening? Because this is not, it's not good. This is just chaos. If there's 2 people, it's easy to improvise and play.
Yeah.
If there's 8 people in a scene and nobody knows what they're supposed to be doing, and it's already a weird show, it doesn't really work. And so that was a really unfulfilling experience, and a director that I hope to never work with again.
Mm.
The show ended up being okay just because of the strength of the musical elements,
Right.
but I mean, the audience still enjoyed it just because it was a famous director and they thought they should enjoy it. I think I just there was too much going on in every scene in that show, and there was no real direction and there was no clarity of storyline. And that also gets back to source material. So a lot of times when I'm doing an opera, there's a book or a play that the show is based on. And I used to do all of that research and study hard and know every single beat that I thought that character should have. And I quickly learned that that was not the best use of my time. If I had a general overview of what the source material was, then I'm at least informed enough to have an opinion if they asked me. But so often the directors are ignoring the source material to begin with because not all of that source material is something that you can show on stage. And that
Right.
gets into another problem with directors when the director's like, okay, you've been the 20 minutes before you entered the scene, you were doing this and this and this and this and this. And if the director is spending an hour talking to you about that, I think that is a waste of time because the audience never sees any of that. Does it change subtly the way I walk through a door to enter the scene? Maybe, but the audience isn't going to pick up on that. So I think that the important thing is to focus on things that you can show the audience. So the directors that obsess with backstory, or even the performers that obsess with backstory, if it's something that can't be shown, then I don't think it's that important because we are telling the story that the audience is seeing, not like a 1,000-page book that they haven't
Right.
read. And
Mm.
if you are obsessing over these tiny details from whatever the original material is that the composer hasn't put in the show, then it's a waste of time. Because we're not doing a play of that book, we're doing the opera, which has a lot of
Yeah.
things missing because you can't physically sing as many words as are in a book.
Right. So just kind of recap. So I love how direct this is. This is not like, so I think even if somebody is listening that is doing a high school show, or maybe you're a professional, or maybe you're doing community theater, or whatever it is, really, this is very uncomplicated. I mean, you do the work, but it's not so abstract. Like you're saying, you start with what, first of all, obviously, you're memorizing the music or your lines or whatever it is. You're getting that down. What are the parameters that you're working with, and get that down so you're not thinking about it. That's preparation. Then you're saying, what is in the actual text? Because that's all you can do. And then do preparation, like you're saying, but then don't make it so much that you can't be worked with. So, like, show up ready to, like, mold yourself, I guess, to what the parameters are from the director, but not like some people just do, like you're saying, add so many extra details that maybe don't fit with the director's vision and maybe don't fit with the play or the show at all. So this is just it makes so much sense. It's like, show up, do your job. What's the job? Portray the character. How do you know that? What the director tells you. And if they give you the freedom to do that, then you can work with that as well.
Yeah, you have to be super prepared, but also super flexible. And that's something that not everybody has because that does take time. And it also, I do a lot of contemporary music. And what I find is a lot of the performers in contemporary music don't have egos because I don't know. It's just a different thing. When you're singing traditional opera, those people have much bigger egos and they're unwilling to be flexible. And the people that do more contemporary music just seem to be just nicer people, better to work with.
Mm.
They're flexible, they're happier colleagues because they're not obsessive. They're obsessive in their preparation, not obsessive in, oh, my voice needs to sound like this on this beat. And that's the other thing too. There are conductors that want every word to say something. I guess that there are conductors that are so, and I've had the fortune to work with these conductors that are so engaged with making sure the music and the stage match. And and then there are conductors that just want the music to be what the composer wrote, and you sing that, and then the acting is, you do whatever you want with acting, but the music has to be this. And then there's conductors that come to every stage rehearsal and they're like, okay, the director wants you to do this, so I think maybe we need to sing it this way instead of this way because that helps the character.
Mm.
And it's a it's an interesting thing because I've done there's an opera that I've done a couple times with two of the conductors that are I mean, the top in the world, and they had very different interpretations. They were with different directors, and both of these conductors are very engaged with the staging process, and it ended up in a completely different interpretation of the way I sing the show. It's the same show, same music, same composer, sung completely differently,
Yeah.
and yet both were extremely successful. So just because a composer wrote it this way and the music has those parameters, there's still flexibility even within the music to interpret it in a way that makes sense for the stage, if that makes
So
sense.
there's so much collaboration going on that I guess maybe one of the pitfalls for an actor might be the acting is what you're doing, so it might be easy to get caught up in this is me, this is how I'm doing, da 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 da, just tunnel vision on focusing on what I have to do. But then because any sort of art form is very collaborative, especially performing arts, you have to be open to your interpretation getting shaped by all these different elements and these people's visions. Then something so like you said though, there's directors that give you more of a vision and some that give you less. So obviously a lot of this can't be taught, but kind of how has it been working with directors when they don't give you a vision? Where do you even start with that? Like even in terms of, as you were saying, you are showing up as an actor in a sequel opera, and they have a double for you when you're not there, that they want that person to walk the same way you do. So even those little choices, how do you make those in the guidelines of your character, and how did you start learning or improving that over the course of your career?
Hmm. I think I had very good directors that poured into me when I was a young artist. Actually, when I wasn't a young artist at this summer festival, but I was at a summer festival singing already a leading role where the young artists were my age, and young artists being the training artists, I mean. And this director there's little things that stick with you for life. Just for one thing, he said when I was playing this one character, if I was walking stage left, so if you're in the audience when you're looking, stage left is in the US, stage left is when you're looking out at the audience to your left. So that would be to the audience if they were looking at you to their right. If you are making a cross stage left as a masculine character, you always lead with your left leg.
Mm.
And that's called a masculine cross. And because I had never thought about something like that, like sometimes there were times where I would just start with my right leg, and that's considered a feminine cross. So if you cross your leg over, that makes your character weaker. And that's something that nobody had ever told me in my whole life.
Wow.
But that's something that's a little acting thing that has stuck with me for the rest of my life since that time. So whenever I make a cross as a masculine character, I lead with the leg in the direction that I'm going. And
Wow.
these are things that I don't know if the audience even picks up on it, but these are the little things. Or the way that men and women communicate in life is very different than how people do on stage sometimes. And that's what makes it a little weird because men, if a man is having a conversation with a man, they don't ever just sit and look face to face, making eye contact and talking.
Yeah.
Usually there is a secondary thing that the focus is on, whether that's in real life, that would be like a television or something, where guys are sitting side by side and having a conversation. So in an opera, you wouldn't just be talking to a guy face to face the way you would a woman, because if you're making eye contact, that's a more intimate scene.
Yeah.
So like those are little acting things that I was taught early on. Or uh, when you're making eye contact with someone, you focus on one eye instead of going back and forth. Now, sometimes in real life, you alternate eyes, but there's so many of the shows that I do that are on film that if there's a close up of you and you're making eye contact with somebody and your eyes are shifting from one eye to the other on the person, it makes you look very shifty.
Yeah, and to
And
the
so
audience, real quick, like watch some of your favorite movies and see what people do. Because professional actors do not, they move their eyes and you can see it and it looks weird.
yeah, because it changes it makes you think, okay, is the character lying? Why are their eyes shifting so much as opposed to just focusing on one eye? I mean, these are just tiny little details. But these are the things that you slowly pick up. Or I had a teacher because I was in a show when I was in college, and the director wasn't doing that much about stage movement.
Okay.
And the teacher said, okay, my teacher said, we're gonna go out during lunch and just sit by the bench, and we're gonna practice how you stand and
Mhm.
how this character bows, because there's this, it was like a 18th century thing, and it was a very stylistic bow that I had to do that nobody had ever told me what to do. And so she said, this is how this character needs to move based on this time period. So these are all the little things that come into it, like how does the character walk, why does the character walk this way. uh, you were talking about this thing with the show where my character isn't actually written into the show, but the director has added me into it as an actor, and I'm not available for all of the performances, so they have a double for me, and the double's having to basically mimic everything that I did in the first show. So they gave him a video to watch so he could see how I move, but the way that that character moves was created over the course of a month and a half of rehearsals
Mm.
between the director and the assistant director and me, and trying to figure out how that character moves, which is very different than the way I move in real life. Um, so I can't even imagine as a double just showing up and me like, okay, I have to do this, but not knowing why they're doing that is a bit tricky. Um, but yeah, for me, I try to find what I personally would do in that situation, even though most of the operas I'm in, I would never be in the situations that that character is in. But I'm
Right.
like, okay, how would I personally react in this situation? And what can I apply of my personal self to this so that it isn't so much acting as it's just me experiencing the situation how I would experience it with through the lens of that character, I guess.
And that is so interesting because I guess something for actors is it could be discouraging if you're like, oh, I don't know, I felt like this before in previous productions, or I've heard people say, like, oh, I just didn't feel like in character today. And that's so abstract. It's like, I needed to become the character and I just didn't. Well, how do you become a dependable character every day of the week in every context? But you're saying it's like the character becoming you a little bit. It's a little bit reverse, and that way, well, you always know what you're going to do because you're you. So
Yeah.
it's so straightforward. It's like it's not like you're magically becoming this like sort of like a weird like morphing experience. It's like this, how am I going to apply what I would react, and then even that's going to take it so much further into how realistic it is for the audience. Because if you're reacting the way you always react, but then even I can see, like, I'm watching the show, to you maybe in your head it's like this is how I would react in this situation, and to me I'm seeing like this completely different character than who my dad is. I like this completely different thing, and so it's so real because of how you're approaching it. It's amazing.
What I can't get my head around the people that are quote unquote method actors where everything has to be exactly like that character even outside of rehearsal. That makes no sense to me at
So
all.
yeah, people, I read this article. Sorry, I kind of interrupt you, but I want you to continue. But she was like she gets into character 2 hours before the show, and I just
Yeah. I can't do that. I mean, there's not time in life to do that. I and even on stage, my job is to make the audience think I'm that person, and but I mean they know I'm an actor, so they know I'm not really that person. But if I can stay in character for the audience while not being in character all the time myself, if
oh,
that makes sense.
I'd like to go into this quickly. Before we are out of time, just this kind of relates to what you're saying. Wasn't it you were Peter Grimes and you like turned because in an opera there's no microphones for those of you that may not know that. So weren't you like having a conversation with somebody regularly and then turning around and to the audience you're Peter Grimes, and to this other person on stage you're yourself?
Well, that yeah, and that's the thing, and you have to know which of your colleagues can handle that, because there are some colleagues that are just like, no, please don't talk to me, and then there's others who you just have conversations with the entire night, and nobody knows that you've been talking in English through the entire performance. I mean, I'm talking about things that are going wrong. I'm like, why did the conductor do this? Why did this happen? Or in one of those rehearsals for Peter Grimes, I literally threw my back out, and it was like one of the dress rehearsals. So I mean that happened, and you still have to go on with the show. But I'm telling my colleague, I'm like, oh yeah, I just put my back out, and you just keep going on with it, and you just make
Wow.
it part of the thing. Okay, well, Peter Grimes may have thrown his back out there, so you do what you got to do.
Wow. But what's so cool to me, and we've just only begun to like scratch the surface of all this thought and all this experience that you have, but this is such like a dependable method. It's not fragile. Like for some people, if they are having a regular conversation or if they were talking to somebody even in the wings and then they have to go on stage and do something, it shatters their character. This is so sturdy. It's like, you know exactly, look at the audience, there you are, acting, blah, 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 turn, have a conversation, turn back. It's like, this is
But I
not,
mean, theater is all multitasking anyway. I
yeah,
mean, there's so many things that you're doing. You have to look at a conductor, you have to be acting with your colleagues. Things are going wrong on stage all the time. So, by nature, when you're on stage in a live performance, there's a lot of multitasking going on in your head. And so, I do verbalize things that the audience can't hear. If I feel like talking, I talk. And if I don't, I don't. And then when I was training, this was the worst. He's a fantastic singer. He's really well known now. And whenever we would go on stage together, he would just always try and get people to break character. And so he was constantly telling jokes and saying things, and it was unbelievably unprofessional. But
that's a
it
little
was
extreme.
it was very funny, and it would made like when you're training, sometimes you're singing these secondary roles, right? So you have to make it a little bit more interesting for yourself, and so it did make it more fun. uh, but you learn very quickly who you can do things like that with on stage and who you can't, because there are people that will just start laughing. So you have to have people that are very committed actors where you can have these conversations with and talk about things that are going wrong without getting them distracted or making them laugh.
And you're saying that those are committed actors in that they are dependable. They're showing up, doing their job. It's so straightforward. And what I love is that I guess some people would say, but I am committed. I'm spending like hours a day doing this and doing all this research of these little things and thinking about what my character ate for breakfast or whatever. But that is, and I guess if you love doing that, that makes it more fun for you, like, sure, but that's like you're saying, that's not portrayed. So,
And but what I would say to that is, who cares? Like, who
yeah.
cares what the character ate for breakfast? But there are people that are thinking, okay, I think this character did this for breakfast.
So I
And
guess it's not like, I mean, I guess if you want to think about that, like, go ahead, but as you're saying,
but does that make you a better actor to think of
right,
what the person ate for breakfast? Some people think it does. And if that
because
makes you get into the mindset of the character better, good for you. But if that's not something that can be portrayed to an audience, I don't think it's worth the time.
yeah. So I really want to. There's so much more we could get into this, like the emotions and the physicality and all that. I'd love to get into that. I think we're out of time for today, but I really appreciate you being here over Zoom. This has been awesome, and I feel like there's just so much. Like, even from what I've observed, I knew you would have a lot to say about this, but there's just so much. I just love getting to get a glimpse into your head. This is what a professional actor and opera singer is thinking, and it makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. It's like this amazing formula that can be applied that just I mean, I really think you are truly the best actor I've ever seen on stage. But this formula
No,
just
I'm
makes
not. But
so
the
much
thing is,
sense.
what's funny is though that, and I've had this conversation with my other colleagues too, that are very good actors and singers. We all, if we've had even a few days off, we're just like, what if we don't know how to do this anymore? All of
Well,
us have this experience. Not everybody verbalizes it, but I definitely do. Like if I've been off for a week or a month, which is very rare, I think to myself, what if nothing comes out? What if nothing comes out? Like just the whole process of being an opera singer, just hearing a note and singing a note, or coming out singing a note on pitch that is just out of the middle of nothing. It's something that you're like, how does that even happen? It's kind of miraculous
yeah.
that it all comes together.
But what's amazing is that And that's something that every performer would experience, but then there's all these things that you've talked about that I think can really help give confidence to. Sorry, my studio manager is telling me it's time to wrap it up.
The MLB just requested you to do a broadcast, so we've got to go.
Okay. Okay, I think actually the Zoom meeting is going to kick me off. But yeah, even though there's so much unpredictability, the things that you've shared are very predictable things I think everyone can apply with great success to whatever they're doing. So thank you so much. All right, as always, this has been the O. Charles Show. I'm your host, Charlie Charles. Over and out.